Good day to one and all. We are going to discuss the poem On Killing a Tree by the famous Indian poet Gieve Patel. This is what we would be doing. I would start by introducing you to the author and his key themes. Then we will read the poem. This will be followed by an analysis of the poem. Then we critically look at certain aspects of the poem and finally the conclusion. This is the poet Gieve Patel, born on 18th August 1940. He's around 80 years of age. He's a poet, playwright, painter and a physician. A rare blend indeed. His poetry collections include poems published in 1966, How Do You Withstand Body, 1976, Mirrored Mirroring, 1991. His plays include Princess, published in 1971, Savaksa, 1982, Mr. Behram, 1987. His debut work, Poems, was published by another famous Indian poet, Nizam Ezekiel. A versatile painter, his paintings have been exhibited in famous exhibitions in art galleries both in India and abroad. Now, let us look at some of the major themes of his poems. Being a painter, he brings his painterly sensibilities into his poetry. Keen observation skills, coupled with an almost clinical precision in describing the experiences around him. He has been called a poet of the body because the human body is a major theme in his poems. Belonging to the green movement of poets, Gieve Patel is deeply concerned about nature and man's growing cruelty towards it. A poet of contemporary reality, his poems brim with ironic humor. The downtrodden, their search for identity, and the gross inequalities of human experiences are some of his other themes. Adil Jussawala, Keki and Daruwala, Kursi D. Katrak, and Gieve Patel form the Parsi quartet in Indian English poetry. Gieve Patel's poems foreground the lives and experiences of the Parsi community. His other famous poems include Grandparents at Family Get-Together, Old Man's Death, Nariyal Purnima. Next, what we have is a picture of a peepal tree, the tree that inspired the poet to pen this poem. He recollects the incident. Now, this happened in the 1960s when the poet was in his 20s. He narrates, I came into the hospital compound one day after a monsoon storm and found this beautiful peepal tree magnificently large. It must have been years and years old, down. It was shocking to see. I sat down then and there and wrote this poem. After, it was held by some people as an environment-conscious poem. And even that I question, because actually it is not saying how to save a tree. It's saying how to kill a tree. The poem, therefore, is not just a plea towards ecological conservation, but also exposes the deep-rooted violence inherent in man. Next, we will read the poem On Killing a Tree. This was published in the collection called Poems, and it came out in 1966. It takes much time to kill a tree. Not a simple jab of the knife will do it. It has grown, slowly consuming the earth, rising out of it, feeding upon its crust, absorbing years of sunlight, air, water, and out of its leprous hide, sprouting leaves. So hack and chop, but this alone won't do it. Not so much pain will do it. The bleeding bark will heal, and from close to the ground will rise curled green twigs, miniature boughs, which, if unchecked, will expand again to former size. No. The root is to be pulled out of the anchoring earth. It is to be roped, tied, and pulled out, snapped out, or pulled out entirely out from the earth cave. And the strength of the tree exposed. The source white and wet, the most sensitive, hidden for years inside the earth. Then the matter of scorching and choking in sun and air, browning, hardening, twisting, withering, and then it is done. We move on to the analysis of the poem. The poem is a dramatization of man's destructive behavior towards nature. The poet attempts to shock the reader out of his complacency with the use of violent imagery. A new vision or perspective, one of conservation of flora and fauna, is espoused. The first stanza, we have the first line there, it takes much time to kill a tree. The opening line of the poem is significant. An act of murder is described in a cold, insensitive, and ironic manner. However, killing the tree is not an easy enterprise. A mere jab won't do it. The tree valiantly fights back. The tree is nourished and nurtured by the formidable elements of nature. It is strong and full of vitality. The tree enjoys a healthy give and take relationship with nature. It has consumed earth, water, air, and sunlight, and in return, it sprouts oxygen-giving leaves. The tree becomes a symbol of resistance. Man is resolved in his intent to destroy the tree. He hacks and chops the trees, inflicts unbearable pain. But the tree shows remarkable resilience. The tree's bark bleeds but heals. Its instinct for survival is noteworthy as it recuperates, soaking in the gifts of nature. Like the mythical phoenix, it rises again, much to man's displeasure. In the final stanza, the act of inhalation is taken to its logical extreme, displaying insatiable cruelty. Man attacks the tree's root, the life force of the tree. The anchoring earth is compared to a mother protecting her child in her womb. The wet white part is pulled out, dealing a lethal blow to the tree. The tree finally succumbs to this extreme violence. Dying is a long drawn-out process. The very elements of nature that nourish the tree become responsible for its destruction. And all this happens because of man's callous interference. The last line, "and then it is done," reeks of misplaced triumph. The victory is rather hollow and temporary because the ultimate loser is mankind. Now let us look at the poem critically. The poem uses strong, provocative, and violent imagery, albeit in a highly detached and objective tone. It is a poem of conservation, as it draws the reader's attention to the predicament of deforestation. There is an attempt by the poet to sensitize the readers to the callous attitude of man towards nature. Clinical and detached in his observations, the poet is devoid of any sentimentality. The literary devices that are used in the poem include alliteration, metaphor, repetition, enjambment, etc. The poem is written in free verse with no rhyme scheme, and the stanzas are also of varying length. Imagery and personification are the poetic devices used in the poem. To conclude, On Killing a Tree is a poem about man's wrong conception of nature. The poet attempts to force the reader to see the flora and fauna around them in a new light. It is also an ominous warning to man. He is also a part of nature, just like the tree once was. The struggle of the tree is real. It is endowed with feelings and emotions. The threat of deforestation, global warming, and climate change may be overlooked only at the risk of one's existence. Thank you for your patient listening.